Hi, and this is part 2 on the video where I am discussing why I refer to encyclopedias, right? And this is a counter-flagged video because I've gotten flagged about that I am an ethical relativist. And I'm an ethical reductivist, not an ethical relativist. And I already explained that in the other video. I'm not going to repeat myself. However, in this video, I want to talk about an article that I read in New World Encyclopedia, which is the one that integrates values and fact. And and in that article, they state that facts are descriptive and values are evaluative, right? And facts are based on evidence and values are premised on competing ethical systems, political, religious, philosophical, right? So, and then people use the precepts of these ethical systems, political, religious, and philosophical, to judge reality and evaluate reality, right? That's values. Whereas fact are derived from evidence, empirical investigation, evidence. You need to have evidence to back up a statement, right? For truth requires evidence, right? Truth requires evidence, which is basically, well, that's the Western theory of knowledge. There is other, because in Buddhism, for a statement to be true, it has to be useful, right? So depends how you look at it. Yeah, there is different epistemological theories as to how you come at truth, right? Yeah. So and there are different theories as to different. There is the debate over whether values can be objective or subjective, whether they are whether they can transcend historical and cultural context or not. So, there is error theory, and these are notes that I took from that article. There is error theory. There is no objective values because value statements are metaphysical, not quantifiable. So error theory denies the existence of objective values, objective ethics, right? Yeah. It's metaphysics. It's something metaphysical. It exists in some ideal realm that doesn't really have any material substance. That sounds a lot like Marxism, okay? Because in Marxism, ideas have no material reality, and in Marxism, material reality is what dictates truth, right? So for something to be true, it has to be material and measurable and quantifiable in a material sense. So God does not exist for that reason, because he's not really quantifiable or measurable or physically proven to be, right? So in Marxism, it's extreme radical materialism, right? Where only the material realm exists and nothing else. There's no the metaphysical realm is simply an idea that exists in people's brains, and you cannot separate ideas from people's brains. That's Marxism. Radical materialism. Right. So error theory sounds a lot like Marxism. No objective values because value statements are metaphysical, not quantifiable. Then there are moral realists, and a lot of people in the fundamentalist religious right are moral realists, right? Jehovah's Witnesses are moral realists, and a type of moral realism. Radical Muslims are a type of moral realism. So and they say evaluative statements can represent facts, like, and usually the example is killing is wrong, right? Which is something that actually in reductive ethics people agree with. Killing is wrong, and in the previous video I said why, right? And I will touch on it again here, but and I mean but religious moral realists would say that God embodies the ethics, right? So God exists. First you have to argue that God exists and come up with proofs of that, and the contemporary proof for the existence of God is is the supreme observer argument, right? And they sort of like draw from this interpretation of quantum mechanics that and that's just one interpretation of quantum mechanics, that for reality to be, for something to be true, has to be observed. And until the particle is precisely identified, the wave function does not collapse until then, and before the wave function doesn't collapse, then whatever it particles at different places at once, and whatever, it hasn't been absorbed yet, so it doesn't exist, right? What have you? So, for the universe to exist, there needs to be a supreme observer that is observing the universe for this to exist, right? Something to that effect is the supreme observer argument, which I've heard it. I've heard that article dissected by both physicists who said that that is not the way quantum mechanics should be applied, and like one interpretation of quantum mechanics should be applied that way is kind of iffy. It's kind of like the people who argue that there are parallel universes based on vulgarizations of quantum mechanics or whatever. So so physicists have come out against this supreme observer theory, hypothesis, actually, because God is a hypothesis. God is not a theory. God is a hypothesis. A hypothesis that could be benevolent if it helps people, but that can be very bad if it's used to destroy people's lives, like with Jehovah's Witnesses. So yeah. On the other hand, you have Community of Christ, which is the religious community that I follow now, Community of Christ. There is a benevolent application of God that helps people. Jehovah's Witnesses is an application of God that destroys people. So you know what I mean? Depends on God. The hypothesis of God is useful depending on how you use it, right? If you use it for good, it brings out good. If you use it for evil, it destroys people's lives. So yeah, like in I don't know, the Islamic State, Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't know, Heaven's Gate cult, Jonestown, Guyana, People's Temple, that, right? Cults, basically religious cults. So yeah, I mean, in the religious moral realists say that God is a reality, because they have faith or what have you, whatever. God is a reality, and He embodies the true ethics, true and universal ethics. So you look at the Bible, Quran, Book of Mormon to discern the ethics of God, and then you develop an ethical system of applying those ethics that come from God. That's the religious version of moral realism. One version. That's the religious version, is what I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with secular versions of moral realism, and you have to look that up separate. And like I've said before in the previous video, ethical relativism, that there do not exist absolute values. Ethical statements must be contextualized by historical and cultural context, right? So yeah, okay. But then I explained that I subscribe to neither moral realism nor ethical relativism. I subscribe to the school of reductive ethics, which state that there is only one universal and absolute, verifiable, quantifiable ethical precept, and that is preservation of life, right? In all societies in history, murder has been illegal. In all societies, regardless of historical and cultural context, murder is always frowned upon, not acceptable, illegal, right? In any context you want to look at it. There is not one human society, from the most primitive to the most advanced, where murder has been legal. None. Okay? If you kill somebody, there will be consequences from the society. Murder is not acceptable, right? And also, preservation of life is the reason why we have, a civilization, which is a city-based society and economy, in order to ensure the reproduction of the species into the next generation and the next generation, etc., right? And that sounds, people are going to say, oh, that's horrible. That's a horrible way of looking at that we only exist basically to fuck and eat. Is that what you're saying? That we work, fuck, and eat, and that's the whole purpose of life? And nothing else? Well, no, we do. Reproduction of the species is reproduction of the species and feeding the young, preserving the young so they can grow up and reproduce. That is part of it, but humans have also developed other things like art and architecture and literature and what have you, right? religion systems and what have you on the side too. While they're engaging in these basic activities, they have also developed on the side other things. Now, Marxists argue that that is made possible because as the economic systems become more advanced, more surplus wealth is created that allows certain elites to create art and religion and what have you, which is a plausible theory. I don't discount that Marxism. I am a communist manifesto Marxist, so I look at Marxism. I take the Marxist viewpoint on board. I have no problem with it. Um, yeah, but again, that's my own thing. Other people have other viewpoints. Um, yeah. Yeah. So basically, ethical reductivism. The only universal and objective ethical precept is preservation of life. All others, all other precepts are then must be contextualized by historical and cultural context, and also by political and religious input. That's ethical ethical reductive, right? Which is what I am. So it's like a compromise between ethical relativism and moral realism. And it is now the ethical reductive is becoming more dominant now because people are very, very critical of um, ethical relativism. And ethical relativism was the dominant school of ethics between the late 70s and 2011 when Luke Turner published the Metamodern Manifesto and began the post-postmodern era, right, which lasted until 2018. And in 2018, the issue of post-metamodernism came up at a conference in Paris. And then now we are in the post-metamodern times. And I mean, post-metamodern is not necessarily good because one of the problems with post-metamodern is that we live in a post-truth environment. So in a post-truth environment, it's a tricky environment to navigate, right? Because yeah, um, a post-truth environment is premised on the idea that truth is subjective, and yeah, but then the issue is what is truth. See, it goes back to the question that Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, "Quid est veritas?" And that's the problem here. See, so okay, a political, religious, journalistic, historiographical viewpoint, you know, even though it's a combination of facts and subjective evaluative analysis, so you got to be able to separate the evaluative from the factual when you look at a political theory, religious theology, journalism, and what do you call it, historiography, right? You have to do that. So that's how you navigate a post-metamodern, post-truth environment that we're now, right? You gotta be sophisticated, and then you have to evaluate information because there is fake news. We live in a time. Fake news is the news in the post-truth environment. We live in a fake news, deep fake post-truth environment where you cannot trust anything. You have to look at the details and look at evidence for evidence everywhere. Evidence. Is this sourced? Is this like whatever? Pictures can be photoshopped, videos can be staged, whatever. Whatever. Records can be altered. Evidence can be destroyed. There's all sorts of problems. Experts can be paid to say what you want them to say. You know what I mean? So we live in a post-truth environment, right? So yeah, to navigate a post-truth environment is one of the concerns of post-metamodern ethics, and this ethical reductivism is like a way to like create a tool to navigate the post-truth environment. Preservation of life is something that you can rely on. It's like you can like it exists, right? So yeah. um yeah, anyways, yeah, I just wanted to do this just to clarify again for the last time. I am not an ethical relativist. I am an ethical reductive. Okay. All right. Thanks. Bye.